For the past several months, you've heard many things in the news about the crash of oil prices all over the world. But do you know who they affected? My name is Megan Martyr, and alongside me I have Carson Donald, Sophia Simoes, Nick Eishen, Chuck Agu, and Connor Dunn. In this presentation, we will discuss the global effects of the oil price crash. I will go over why the prices began to drop, if the crash could have been avoided or controlled, the growth and formation of oil prices, petrodollars, oil prices in the United States, and the different foreign countries that have been affected. We have not always had low oil prices. In the past, they were very high. The oil price crash of 2014 is one of the sharpest drops in history, but it came after 5 years of stability. An oil price crash of this magnitude does not happen overnight, and therefore, to understand the cause, it's necessary to start with the events that occurred a couple years ago. Oil prices were rising sharply because global demand was surging, especially in China, and there simply wasn't enough oil production to keep up. That led to a large price spike, and oil hovered around $100 per barrel between 2011 and 2014. Due to a high demand for oil, prices were peaking non-stop. Energy companies found a profitable way to extract oil from hard-to-drill places. Plummer argued that the U.S. was one of the leading countries in the bloom of unconventional oil production, adding 4 million extra barrels daily since 2008 in the global market. Subsequently, the oil supply caught up with its demand, but the production and the global supply of oil continued to increase, eventually leading into an excessive production. At the same time, cars became more fuel efficient, and the production across the world became weakening. The combination of a weaker than expected demand and a steadily rising supply caused oil prices to start dropping from their June peak of $115 per barrel down to $80 per barrel by mid-November of 2014. In the next couple of months, prices continued to drop, and by January 2015, a barrel had lost more than half of its original value. The rapid and drastic oil price crash leaves the question, could the crash have been avoided or at least controlled? The answer is yes. According to Plummer, OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exploring Countries, one of the largest oil cartel, was the one expected to take action. However, on its biggest meeting in November, nothing was done. Some countries wouldn't give in hope that the low prices would affect other countries in a negative way. As a result, oil went into free fall. The rapid and uncontrollable oil price crash left the world with a lot of consequences and benefits, and 6 months after, we can still see it around. In the past few months, there has been a notable decrease in gas prices, casually driving throughout U.S. cities. You see the notable drop in gas prices. While this decrease in gas prices is a moment of joy for most Americans, the plunge in prices is affecting the global economy more than the average person realizes. The article Understanding the Plunge in Oil Prices will go into great detail on how these factors have been affected by the price decline. The first factor, input costs, are the materials that are used to discover and refine oil. Their individual prices are decreased on the account of the oil price decline. Especially oil-powered machines, their production prices decrease as the oil prices decrease. Also, oil is used in many different production categories such as plastics, petrochemicals, papers, and aluminum. As oil prices decrease, this leads to a decline in price for all these different products. Second, real income shifts. Generally, this oil price decline positively affects oil importers such as the United States and negatively affect oil exporters such as Saudi Arabia economically. Oil importers create more income when oil prices decline. They are able to increase oil purchases because of the low oil prices. This leads to a higher demand of oil on a global level. On the other hand, exporting countries usually draft policies that constrict production to offset the oil price decline. Third, monetary and fiscal policies on oil importing companies' oil's production dropping usually leads to medium-term inflation. National banks sometimes have to draft different monetary policies to stimulate economic growth. Low inflation and high production output yield good economic results for oil importers. However, oil exporters draft policies that lower national spending because of the income decrease due to the oil price decline. Lower oil prices affect global inflation. Low oil prices have also led investors to increase funding in oil importing countries or reassess prospective production. This has led to more government involvement into oil and lesser funds for the oil-producing companies in their respective countries. Also, oil exporters invest their money into government bonds, corporate bonds, and real estate. These funds are called petrodollars. These petrodollars help the government's economy function, but if the oil price continues to stay down, these petrodollars will lose their value, therefore hurting countries that rely heavily on the petrodollars. The environment also suffers from these low oil prices. The oil price decline will increase oil harvesting, putting a toll on the environment. This would lead to more money spent by governments to reduce the impact of the environment from increased oil production. In America, there are many different opinions on the drop of oil prices, but one fact is certain: the drop in oil prices affects the U.S. economy in many ways. There are many pros and cons to what the prices do to our economy. Falling oil prices negatively affect producers while helping consumers save money. The short-term effects of low oil prices seem to be beneficial, but in the long-term effects, these might not be too appealing for the U.S. economy. The short-term effects of lower oil prices are mostly good for the economy. The drop in gas price has saved roughly $75 billion over the past 6 months for consumers, according to economics at Goldman Sachs. Reza Varjavan states that the average American consumer who spends $3,000 a year on gasoline may save as much as $1,000, the equivalent of about 2% increase in the yearly income of a typical household. With this increase in money that is being saved, consumers begin to spend more. This obviously positively impacts the economy in many ways. If oil prices remain low for too long, the U.S. economy could be affected in a negative way because the oil industry could eventually suffer. When the price for oil falls below $60 a barrel, the oil industry cannot make profit. This is described as the break-even price. When there are not enough profits, there might be a massive withdrawal from financial and real resources from the industry, forcing shale oil companies to downsize or discontinue operations. Price crash also affected jobs in the United States. Roughly 360,000 jobs have been created in the last decade because of some relation to the oil and gas industry. It has produced not only jobs for petroleum engineers and workers on oil rigs, but it has also constructed jobs for the entire mining industry. With that being said, one of the most major and most detrimental effects of the oil price decline is the loss of jobs all over the country. Although people outside of the oil industry think they are safe from these upsets, they will surely have a ripple effect on different industries across the country, such as real estate and local banks and businesses. The extra money that just a short while ago was being spent at the gas pump was helping many diverse industries, both directly and indirectly. Another impact of the layoffs is simply that when people lose their jobs, they have no income. If people are not making money, then they cannot spend money, therefore directly impacting other businesses. With thousands of different workers in the oil industry, it is easy to see how quickly those numbers can add up and how it can have a major effect on local businesses. With the loss of income is what first comes to mind when someone loses his or her job. Another dominant factor is the forfeiture of healthcare. In today's society, you simply cannot afford to be without it. Something even more discomforting and concerning is the fact that people have children on their healthcare plans through their jobs. Not only is the decline of gas prices affecting people's livelihood, but also their entire family. The seventh largest export was affected by the oil price crash in a negative way since their economy is so dependent on oil revenue. It went into the oil price crash with a troubled budget. Venezuela is dependent on oil for some 40% of its fiscal receipts, while over 90% of its foreign exchange comes from oil export. According to GRI, Venezuela has a public that has 50% of GDP and a budget deficit of 16%. Therefore, Venezuela is in a vulnerable position because of its plummet of oil prices. Due to its vulnerability, Venezuela's economy will shrink about 3% this year. It is also in fiscally dire straits, but the risk of political instability is pronouncedly lower. However, Ecuador already has plans to get out of the situation. According to Plummer, the government has listed a number of options available to finance its expenditures. And beyond that, Korea's political position is much more solid than Maduro's, with high approval ratings and a strong economy. Which are home to about a third of the world's population living on under $1.25 a day, will in fact benefit from the oil price crash. Oil accounts for about a third of India's import, but its exports are diverse, so they are not seeing across-the-board price declines. Secondly, cheaper energy moderates inflation, which has already fallen from over 10% in early 2013 to 6.5%, bringing it within the central bank's informal target, necessarily be affected by the oil price crash. The reason for that being that Brazil is a country that has more focus in production for their own instead of importing and exporting. Global Risk Insights said that as a result, the effect of the falling oil price on Brazil is mixed. Saudi Arabia is the largest exporter of crude oil and other petroleum liquids in the world. The sharp decline of the OPEC reference basket price from $107.89 in June 2014 to $44.38 in January 2015 would appear to have had a significant effect on the Saudis' economy. The future of their economy looks dismissal at the financial analysis. Fadel Al-Buendin states that if oil prices continue to fall, Saudi Arabia may run a large deficit next year. Even though the oil price has not immediately affected the Saudis' economy quite yet, their planned use of their reserve money and their possibilities of economic diversification currently overrule their skepticism of a financial crisis, estimated to be when oil drops around $30 per barrel, which is highly unlikely nonetheless. Geography is a huge factor in terms of how this oil price crash affects you. In the U.S., it might be greatly beneficial for the time being because of the roughly $75 million that has already been saved. However, as any American knows all too well, nothing as good can last for that long. All in all, the effects vary from every different aspect, and they range from good to bad in all different parts of the world. The oil industry is unpredictable and can change in a blink of an eye, but if history has taught us anything, that is that the oil industry will eventually pick back up even after